Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus mini-sodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive mini-sode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast, and happy Black History Month, and also happy Chinese New Year, the year of the tiger. It's the start of a new lunar new year. And for all of these reasons, we are happy to introduce you today our guest, Andrena Sawyer, who is the president of PERC Consulting, an advisory firm for small to mid-sized nonprofits and businesses, and the founder of McWen, which is a faith-based network for women of color entrepreneurs. Also, in addition to her work with entrepreneurs and nonprofits, she's the author of several books, including The Misadventures of a New Entrepreneur, 5 Things They Won't Teach You in Business School. Welcome to today's show, Andrena Sawyer. Hello, Andrena. Good morning. Welcome to the World of Difference podcast.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so fun to have you. It's nice getting to know you, and I'm so excited to introduce you to the World of Difference listeners around the world. Why don't you start off by just giving us a little bit of background about who you are and what you're currently doing?
Sure. It's, again, a pleasure to be here. My background is I work as an entrepreneur and a consultant with small businesses. I'm currently on the East Coast. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've been a full-time entrepreneur. I'll be celebrating 11 years in September. And a big part, thank you. A big part of the work that I am doing now is just me trying to fulfill this purpose that I feel like I have, not just in terms of occupation, but just being meaningful to my community and being impactful in the world. I was born in Freetown, Sierra Leone, a small country on the West Coast. I grew up in New Jersey, and I ended up in the DC area about, 18 years ago. And I've pretty much been here for most of that time.
Such a fascinating background, and I love what you're doing. We're going to try to get into some of it with our questions with whatever time we have here today. But first of all, I just have to start with the whole background of Sierra Leone and we could probably take 2 whole podcasts to talk about that part of your life, but I just want to give you an opportunity just to share with our audience. We may even have people listening today in Sierra Leone, or at least in some of the surrounding countries there in West Africa. But so what was it like, as you were experiencing some of the stuff as a young child, and then also leaving Sierra Leone with your family to move to the United States when you were, was it 9 years old?
Yeah, when I was 9 years.
Yeah.
So it was hard. My family and I came to the US in the middle of a civil war that ended up actually being a decade-long civil war, so about 10 years. And we were in Freetown, Sierra Leone at the time, and the war actually started in the outskirts. So, as young as I was, I do have memories of people not thinking that the war was going to make it into the capital. And then it seemed like almost overnight things changed. And I say overnight because at 9 years old, like you don't really know exactly what's going on. You just kind of pick it up on clues. But I remember literally one night gunshots going off and my family explaining the next day that it was the soldiers shooting at rebels. And so the war started, let me back up and say the war started after a coup attempt in Liberia. And so it was basically a civil war between a rebel group and then the government. And so they'd made their way into Freetown. I had a classmate that was shot. That was the closest that the war had gotten at that time, shot and killed by a stray bullet. And luckily for us, my mom worked as an airline stewardess with KLM Airlines at the time. So we were able to get out of the country, come to the United States. And that transition was hard. But I am grateful because I had super kind parents who tried their best to shield us as much as they could.
Wow. I mean, just so much there. You're just the trauma of your classmate. When your classmate was shot, was it when you were in school together or were they somewhere else?
Yeah, no, it wasn't during school hours. They'd gotten shot later after school, and then we found out about it the next day. And,
That's so
I
hard.
remember school officials not telling us all the details, but, the community starts to talk. And I do remember it coming out that she was shot by a stray bullet.
So devastating. What was her name?
I don't remember her name.
Yeah. I mean, and part of that memory just may be a little bit suppressed because it was so traumatic as well. So
It
you may not
was.
remember everything about it, which sometimes happens with traumatic events, but such a shame. And you were, I same the same age, like around 7 or 8 years old, or how old were you?
Yep, about 8. And you know what's funny, Lori, is I don't remember her name, but I have a very vivid memory of her. So at the school that I went to, a primary school, they used to make us do morning prayers. So we would sit at the table with our arms, folded in prayer. And that's really my only memory of her is her sitting at the table. So I don't remember her name. I don't remember a lot of other details. We weren't like close friends at that age, but I remember her. And I remember when we made the connection and it was announced in school that, this person had been killed, obviously I knew who she was.
Yeah.
And that's when it started to become, oh, this is not just something the adults talk about. This is something that's literally about to change all of our lives.
Yeah. It's so awful. Things like coup attempts, which I've lived through in Venezuela and some kind of pseudo related things in Indonesia, but definitely my years in Venezuela, I experienced that type of thing where it just comes out of nowhere, and so it can
Yeah.
really surprise you, especially when
Yeah.
you're young. Like you said, the adults sometimes know, but as a child, they protect you from those things. And you're not like constantly watching the politics and things like that to really expect something like that. So it can be additionally surprising and shocking, which when you have a level of trauma that involves a shock and a surprise, that just kind of adds a layer to it because you didn't really have a way to prepare for. Nobody can prepare, but when it's that out of the blue for you, it must have been hard.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it's forever changed my family. It's changed me, of course, in the way that I look at life and look at work and community. But it's changed my family because as a result of the war, our family was scattered. So luckily, our unit, my parents and my sister, one sister at the time, we came here together. But I have aunts, uncles, cousins that I have not seen since my family left in 1995 because they also had to flee and they went to Banjul and Nigeria and Ghana and all these other places. So it's devastating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I mean, I lived through a civil war in Aceh province in Indonesia, but I wasn't a citizen there. And, like you're saying in the capital, you expect it to be a little more sheltered from what's happening. And I lived in the city of Banda Aceh. And so we didn't have the same level of fighting as they experienced in other places. Occasionally we'd hear bombs go off or things like that, or they would just say, don't go out after the Maghrib, the sunset prayer. It's just don't be out at dark. And the kind of the war, they kind of did like the war at dark and then the main capital city.
Wow.
And that was like a 35-year long war. I think it's one of the longest running civil wars in the world. It's pretty crazy, but kind of has an ebb and flow to it. But yeah, the way people get scattered, the way you don't ever see people again that meant something so dear to you and you didn't really have a chance to say goodbye, all that level of trauma, it changes you as a person.
And I know this because of the stories of so many of my Achinese friends, and they would show us their little photo albums, and you go to their house and it's like, here's so and so, I don't really know what happened, like the rebels kidnapped them or the military kidnapped them, and it's just the trauma just kind of stays with you. It's a part of who you are as a person. But it sounds like for you, like, I appreciate that you're able to, freely talk about it, because some people just kind of don't want to go there, and it's, that's okay. Everybody makes their choices. But I think that um, there's a level of resiliency, I think, in you, where you can own the bad parts and say, these are hard and this is still hard and I don't understand it all. But at the same time, you've taken some of the good parts of it that give you a resilience to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure it played into all of that. So how would you describe that part of your story of what you've brought out of it that's helped you be who you are?
It's interesting because even as an adult, I don't think I processed it until recently, the last couple of years. And what I'm realizing, or did realize, is that a lot of the work I'm doing now is fueled by survivor's guilt. So there was a time where I wouldn't even talk about it. I think the only time prior to maybe about before 32, the only time I wrote or talked about the war in detail was in my college application, right?
Wow.
And I mentioned that I'd survived civil war and all of that. But later on, I felt guilty talking about it so freely, because the truth of the matter is, by the grace of God, my family was able to get out of there.
Yeah.
But I know of people who were not as fortunate. If they were not killed in the war, they had family members that were killed, they had family members that were maimed. And so there was a part of me that felt like a hypocrite to freely talk about this war that we escaped. Right.
Wow.
But the way now that I'm able to kind of channel that with the work that I'm doing is to use it as motivation to help other people tell their stories. So even if you are not a Civil War survivor, you probably survived something. There's something in your life that's moving you toward just being a more purpose-driven person, like the stories that we have. And so I've dedicated my career now to helping people through my consulting work, through an organization I started a few years ago, where I just want people to tell stories. I want people to live to their maximum capacity, die empty. It's kind of the morbid motto that I have, but just not everybody got the chance that I did. So not only do I want to maximize that, but I want to help other people maximize that as well.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah. And I think that survivor's guilt is a pretty common feeling a lot of people have. A very natural feeling if you care about others, which clearly you do. And most people have that kind of reaction at some level. But you honor all of the people of Sierra Leone when you help in the ways that you are and help take the good from that. And you had a mom who worked for KLM and you had that blessing in your life. And instead of feeling guilty about it, to just say, you know what, I do this to honor everyone that went through really hard stuff. And that includes people who, like you said, maybe didn't go through something as traumatic as a civil war, but that you can help people tell their stories, because it is a really powerful way of us healing from our trauma. And we all have varying levels of experiences in life. So I love that you're a starter. Clearly, you're a person who likes to start things. So tell us a little bit about when you were 15, you founded Triple T Mad Teens Trying to Make a Difference. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. If you can't tell, I have a thing for long names. But I did. I started Triple T Mad as a way to give back in my community. I think 15 is when I started to kind of come into my own, for most, as it is for most teenagers. And I knew that we spent a lot of idle time. I grew up in central New Jersey. We spent a lot of idle time talking about hip hop music and dance competitions and all these things. And there's always been something in me that said there's a little bit more to life than rap, rap concerts. And so, I try to mobilize my friends mostly, and then it kind of branched out a little bit to do one thing a month for the community. So we would go out to the soup kitchen. A few times we did March of Dimes and raise money. Sometimes we did the AIDS walk because a mentor of mine had been diagnosed with HIV. So it started off as just a commitment to do one thing a month as a collective group of friends. And then at my church at the time, some of the other people that weren't a part of my friends network really liked the idea of just giving back. And so once a month, it grew from maybe about, 7 kids doing something to at one point, I think almost about 30 kids just committing
Wow.
to doing one thing a month. Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I love that even at 15, after all you'd been through, you could find a way to organize people. You're clearly a real leader, which is like, even at 15, we can see that in your life. But then when you were a student, I guess at Howard University, you also you founded Rock the Mic. And so tell us
Yeah.
about that. It's an annual outreach. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rock the Mic, and the mic stood for a ministry inside the community. Again, just this giving back theme that I have in my life. And we would do an annual outreach in the summer where we would couple rap music and the concerts with a community give back. So we had local stores donate products, food for our cookout, and then we would fill these bags with back to school items for kids. And then we canvassed the community and just told people to come out so they could play basketball, listen to a concert, or just grab a bag to go. And I did that for about 3 years in college.
That's awesome. What was it like being at Howard University and just that whole experience? I hear it's a great place to study, but for you, what was your experience like there?
I loved it. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I belonged. And yeah, for those who don't know, Howard University is an HBCU, so it's a historically Black college or university. And it was formed to allow students of color to be able to study. And oddly enough, Howard was the only HBCU I applied to because I come from a background where HBCUs are stigmatized as not being competitive in the real world, which is not all Black. And I went there and I visited, and I don't know if it was a spiritual experience, but I knew that was where I was supposed to study. And when I went there, I just saw all these different people of color. We're talking conservatives, we're talking artsy, we're talking, rockers, but there were so many different lifestyles represented, but the commonality was they looked like me. And so I felt like home. I was challenged academically and socially. I was exposed to a lot. So I loved it. I loved Howard. I'm a proud Bison for life.
Well, I hear that consistently from the alumni from Howard University. It's exciting that you had that experience too. And we're in this series now on belonging. And so, I think that when you find that place where you belong, it's just nothing is like it. And I think as leaders, we have the opportunity to create that kind of belonging for people around us, right? To help contribute to human flourishing and helping people on our teams that we lead to thrive. But belonging is not an easy thing to create, and it's certainly not easy in a world as polarized as ours. And so I would love to know your advice for any of these aspiring entrepreneurs and leaders out there on how to create belonging for their people that they lead.
Yeah, lead with transparency. I would say that's probably the most important lesson that I've learned. When I came into entrepreneurship, I was young, I was 25. And so there was a lot of fake it until you make it is what I thought, I had to do. And then I realized once you pretend to be something, you now have the pressure of living up to that thing that's not genuine. And it's a lot of work to live a pretend life. So to the person trying to create community, be authentic and transparent because you'll attract the people who can relate to that authenticity. And then the growth in the community becomes organic. Don't be ashamed of the story. So whether you are in a super conservative space or you are more in a free flowing space, be authentic to who you are. Set structures for whatever community. So people come to you as a leader of their community with the expectation that you know what you're doing. So do the work of setting some structures, setting some parameters. I'll give you an example, Lori. One of the things that we do with my women's group is we have a Facebook group. And you would think, oh, it's just a Facebook social community, like nobody really cares. And I found that we've seen the most organic growth, the most organic connections being made between even our Facebook members when we guide their interactions. So when we give them the prompts, when we ask them for their commonalities. So set some structures, lead with some prompts. Respond to how people come, like when they come to you, make sure that you respond with something to give them.
Oh, that's really great advice. Yeah. We had Nona Jones on the podcast not long ago, and she talked about how to create connection and community, through her work at Facebook, but also as a pastor. And And she has found kind of great success in doing that. You even wrote a book about it. But I think that when it comes to social media, so much of it is what we make of it, and I do think that leaders have opportunities in the social media space for sure to create belonging. It's really tricky, not easy. And we're all sort of fumbling through it. But I like your example of your Facebook group and giving prompts and helping people know how to connect, setting the tone. I think you're right. I think leaders set the tone of how this is going to go. And
Absolutely.
are we going to be like nasty to each other, or are we going to just say every person's voice here matters and we all belong, and let's just be kind in how we talk to one another?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because the other thing I would say is create a culture of inclusion for people, because it's easy, even without ill intent, for one person to dominate and monopolize a space, or for a certain person to feel ostracized or not welcome. And it's your job as a leader to really set the tone and create a culture where there's a rhythm to participation. And if that looks like us asking people in a very deliberate manner, okay, your turn, okay, this person's turn. Or if it just looks like, we circulate how people participate and engage in the community. But it's our job to be deliberate about inclusion so that nobody feels that they're not welcome. Now, naturally, some people will find a flaw in the community. But to me, the piece that I have is knowing that it's not because of anything that we intentionally did. So, and then we own it. If someone brings it to our attention and says, hey, I was offended by this, we own it, even if it was not intentional. So
yeah, of course. We're all still learning, and even language is changing. I mean, obviously, my experience of being in the United States is, this is very, famous. The English language, especially in America, is constantly changing. And when it comes to what are the right words to say, if you use words, and we're not even talking using words from the 1950s, we're talking sometimes using words from just like 2 years ago, right?
yes.
And so, yeah, we're constantly having to learn. And as a person who's learned a lot of languages, and you probably speak another language or two in there, that like it's important to learn how to speak in the ways that communicate well to people. And so that is part of it. Getting people's pronouns right is something we're all learning, and how to do. And it makes people feel better when you get their pronouns right and that type of thing, regardless of how you feel about it. I think that creating belonging for people is important. And so I love how you talked about that. I would love to know your thoughts on, because we're getting into Black History Month. And so I just want to know, as a person who came from Sierra Leone and now as an American, what does Black History Month mean to you?
It's recognition. It's that belonging, like it's being intentional about saying to a group of people, you belong. It's funny that you mentioned language and Black history. One of the things that we recently had to do was publish a note on our website that says we understand that some people like to be referred to as Black, some people prefer people of color, some people don't want people of color because it's reminiscent of being called a colored, right, which is not socially acceptable anymore. And what I love about Black history is it does away with some of those nuances, and it says, let's just focus on this. Let's focus on the progress that collectively Black people have made to America and to the world, and let's celebrate that. For 28 days, we can stand to diffuse the tension, bridge the gap, cross those bridges, and just celebrate who you are. And to me, that says a lot. I think it's a great model for other groups of people that have felt disenfranchised or ignored. It's a great example of what it looks like to just say, we get it. Can we just focus on the positive for a little bit as we figure out how to work through some of those challenges?
Yeah, such a good posture. That's really so needed. I also would be interested to know, as you were growing up in New Jersey and learning about, I know today still in our public school curriculums, the Black history element is still very lacking. But I assume there was probably at least moments when you were at Howard University where there were some kind of aha moments about some of the Black history. And so do you have any story about a time in your life where you kind of didn't understand Black history in the way that it should have been taught to you? And then when you finally did, what that was like for you. Is there any experience like that you had?
Absolutely. And that's even part of the grievance that some communities have with Black History Month, is because they feel like it's too one-dimensional. It's such a one-dimensional approach to recognizing Black people. I remember being in calculus class at Howard and the conversation turning into Black history and Black people's contributions to mathematics. And I think that was my first aha moment at Howard, where I realized, okay, this is not an ordinary math class, because I'm used to Black history being kind of an insert into the history books that we only talked about in social studies occasionally. And to see Black history kind of spread out in all areas of life as represented by calculus at that time was like, oh my gosh, Black people are so much bigger than just occasional contributions to history and social studies. I get it. Like, I get the grievance. I get why some people don't celebrate Black history. Some people don't celebrate a Juneteenth, for example. And that's because they refuse to be relegated to just this. Like, our contributions are 365, not just 28 days. Does Black history solve everything? Absolutely not. Black History Month does not solve everything, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I've had a lot of aha moments. For me, growing up in New Jersey, I became pretty aware that I was having this bicultural experience and this tension, right? So there's Andrena, the African, who appears to be Black, who to some people, they don't even pick up on an accent, so they just think I'm African-American. Yeah. And then there are some people who are Black, who know about me being Sierra Leonean, and I'm not quite Black enough. Like, I'm more African to them than I am African-American. And so Black history to me is even not comprehensive enough to include someone like me, right? Because most of it will talk about African-American contributions to history and to life, not going back to African contributions, continental Africans. And so if I can stand to nitpick all of those things, that conversation will never end. And so one of the reasons I appreciate Black history is because I know that it's nearly impossible to talk about Black history without talking about everything, dating back to Egyptian contributions with the pyramids. And even, prior to that, if we can't talk about it all, I will just take one step at a time. And I think for me, that realization with Black history, especially in education, that's where my appreciation comes for the effort. It's not everything, but it is something.
Yeah, no, I love hearing your perspective on that. I have an older brother who's he's a professor. His PhD is philosophy of pedagogy, and he's really into like how curriculum development happens and multicultural elements and that kind of thing. But one of the things he told me when my children were like, my oldest was elementary school age, he was like, make sure your kids understand that all the subjects connect to all the subjects. Like, there's not just like math and then history, but like there's a connection, and such a perfect example of why we need to know that there were Black people who contributed to calculus, because there is such a connection, and so beautiful the way that came. I wish it had come for you earlier in life, and hopefully we'll do better in these coming generations than we've did in the past. But yeah, it's just important to know that I think this is a part of like for women's history as well, that it's really his story. It's kind of her story too. Like so many of the examples, especially women of color, Black women who contributed either inventions or ideas, and they were commandeered by men, particularly white men. And it was as if they had done it. And so looking back on history, there's a bit of a controversy there too, where people say, why are we rewriting history? And it's like, well, we're looking at it with the lens of what we know now, that we need to kind of comb that with a fine tooth comb, because maybe there was, I heard recently there was some famous classical pieces of music written by, was it Mendelssohn or somebody's sister? And like, he got the credit because nobody believed a woman could actually do that. It's like, so he just took the credit. But it's like, well, if that was going on for so long, and everything got so whitewashed, it's why we really do need at least a whole month to kind of just focus on it with that lens. And so obviously, like you said, it's controversial. Not everybody sees the need for it, but I certainly do. And I'm glad that you gave us your perspective on it, both as an African and as an American. What are the parts of your heritage from Sierra Leone and the history of that nation that you're proud of, that you carry with you today?
Literally everything. Even down to the name, right? I come from Freetown, which is the capital, and the history of Freetown is that it became kind of this hub for freed slaves. So free slaves that were coming from America, they first to congregate. Well, they started in Liberia and made their way to Freetown, hence the name Freetown. Um, so I love it because it's representative of the resiliency of the Sierra Leonean spirit, freed slaves, free people. I love the resiliency of Sierra Leone. So since I came to the United States, the country has endured the Ebola outbreak. We've endured a mudslide that killed hundreds of people. And it seems every few years, something else happens in Sierra Leone. And mind you, Sierra Leone is about 6.5, our population count is about 6.5 million. So we're not very large. But you have these people who refuse to give up. We refuse to cower and just die, even though it seems there's catastrophe always around the corner. I love the language. I love the food. I love that, our native language is Creole, which is just broken English. But when we talk to each other, you'd be thinking, you think that we speak in this like high level, sophisticated language, but it's just broken English. And there is just a sense of belonging. You've used that word a lot when we get together. I love that we don't focus on the negative. When you talk to Sierra Leoneans, we're known for having like good parties.
Oh yeah, that's
because
nice.
we're jovial people. So we don't focus on the negative that's happened. And I love that. I love that we're innovative people. Sierra Leone didn't have national light, like a national electricity system, until I think maybe 2019, maybe
Wow.
2018, 19. Yeah. So it wasn't, blackouts weren't uncommon. Having a generator in your house was necessary. But we're always looking for ways to evolve. We're always looking for ways to adapt, even though we are under-resourced and underfunded. Some of the most brilliant people I know, I feel like, are Sierra Leoneans. Some of the most innovative businessmen and women. We make much of little. So I'm proud of my country.
Yeah.
I'm proud that we are, like diamonds. You can mine diamonds in Sierra Leone. How much more valuable can you get than
Yeah, that's
of a
true.
resource than diamonds? So it means a lot to me. I'm very, very proud of it. I've always wished that there was more that I could do in the actual country, but I'm proud of what it's made me, and I'm proud of the community that I come from.
Well, thank you for sharing that part of you and your nationality with us. And it makes us all want to just go there too and just experience the jovial nature, the party and the food, and see those beautiful diamonds and and
Right.
all that. But yeah, this is like tourism advertisement for Sierra Leone right now.
Give me 10%, okay?
That's right. That's right. Let her go back. That's awesome. And I do hope that you get a chance to give back to your nation that's meant so much to you and still means so much to you today. At some point in your future, who knows? Who knows what's in store for you and the way that your entrepreneurship will circle you back there in some ways. That would be really cool to see. I want to ask you this question here as we're sort of kind of ending our time together. I know that you're a person who talks about purpose a lot. And so as a person who's an entrepreneur and is influential as a leader, what is purpose and why should leaders pay attention to it?
Purpose is our reason for living and being. I think all of us were created with something unique to contribute to the world. Even if you have a skill set that it seems a lot of people have, the way that you use that skill set is important and it's unique. A lot of us have all of us have stories to tell about, the different paths that life has led us in. And I think purpose is our ability to tell those stories and to leave impact while living a life that's comforting to all of us. As a leader, it is my greatest hope and goal that everybody that I come in contact with becomes aware of that they're not just going through life in a monotonous way where we wake up, go to work at 9, clock out at 5, and that's kind of the end. I think purpose is connected to our legacy. So If all we do is a 9 to 5, but we do it with diligence and we impact people at a 9 to 5, that matters, but it takes intentionality to do that. If you're like me, where you're trying to start businesses and your occupation is directly tied to your purpose, that matters. So being intentional about that. If you are a mom who's not working, right, and all you're doing is impacting, all in quotes, is impacting your children, that matters, because one day your children will tell stories about the kind of mother you are, and your grandchildren, will be directly impacted by that. So I think purpose is about intentionality, and it's about making sure that our unique contributions are told and they're highlighted. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I know a lot of entrepreneurs and especially small business owners during the pandemic have faced a lot of discouragement. And so, yeah, I know that holding on to purpose can be challenging at times for people. So what is your advice for people in this scenario who are just facing discouragement right now?
Yeah. First of all, to take the pressure off and understand that it's okay. We're all emotionally fatigued at this point. And for a long time, I was in denial about it, because I just felt like if I took a minute to address the fatigue, everything would collapse. So I think, the first kind of step in dealing with trauma, we've all experienced kind of a collective trauma, is to just address that it's normal to grieve and it's normal to want to rest. Then the second thing I would say is re-strategize, right? Like life and work and relationships look very different for all of us. And it's not due to any reasons on our, like, it's not due to anything that we've done. And so if your work is going to require you to pivot in some way and to re-strategize, and that looks completely different than what you thought it would, it's okay. Give yourself the grace to re-strategize and to pivot. One of the things that purpose has taught me, one of the things that purpose has taught me is that it's okay. It's bigger than me, right? And so I might go into a situation and into a scenario where I plan to contribute one thing, but the situation demands something completely different. Purpose is about responsiveness. So in this pandemic, as we're all processing, it's okay to take a responsive posture where you don't always have to just do. Sometimes it's about you just sitting and responding to whatever the needs are at the time. And the last thing I'll say is don't give up. Like, stick with it. The hard parts are part of the journey. I believe that the hard parts actually were more helpful to me than the good parts. They shaped the character. They shaped some resiliency. They encouraged me to be more persistent. They helped me find out what I was really, really made of. And so to the person who's going through a hard time, don't discard it. Don't reject it. Don't run away from it. It's okay.
That's amazing advice. And I hope that everybody around the world listening is taking that to heart. It's okay to rest. It's okay. Our bodies need that. It's okay to just be human. We're all human right now. And hopefully that message that we're getting is it's okay to be a person who has needs and to take care of yourself. Like, self-leadership can be one of the hardest things, self-management and all of that. And so I hope that people listening are just giving themselves some grace, because it has been hard all around the world with this pandemic, no matter what your role is, whether you're, like you said, a mom who's doing unpaid work or you're an entrepreneur. All of us are kind of collectively facing this together. I know that you have a book and you have a place that people can find you. And so I want to leave our audience with ways to find out more about you and the message that you have and the work that you do. So tell us where to find you.
Yeah, so I'm social. I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter right now, and LinkedIn, but my handles are Andrena, first name _ last name Sawyer. And then I have a website, andrenasawyer.com, where you can get connected to all the social platforms. And I have a few books. The latest one is called The Misadventures of a New Entrepreneur. And that is for the purpose-driven person. The purpose-driven person who hasn't walked a straight line and has had to deal with the ebb and flow of it all. So I talked about how starting a business, I thought purpose was this sensational kind of idea that I saw on Instagram, where I had this idea, I pitched it, I got the funding, and then 3 days later, I'm on the beach. And it didn't look like that for me. It looked like a lot of losses. It looked like a lot of rejection and no's. It looked like me having to motivate myself a lot of times because other people could care less. They have their own things to worry about. And so I shared those stories. And then I also share a little bit of some technical things that you can do to get your foundation going if you are thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship. So things like funding and strategic planning and marketing, I touch on those. It's a small book, but I try to pack in there as much as I can.
Well, love it. Yeah, people are busy. So it's small tends to get read a little more. And we'll definitely link in the show notes to that so people can find your book and find you on social and learn more about what you're doing and your purpose and how that can be inspiring to the rest of us. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And I hope you have a great Black History Month and just enjoy all of it.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
It was. Bye. What a wonderful conversation with Andrena Sawyer. Man, I really want to go to Sierra Leone at some point. She was very compelling in her painting the picture of this wonderful country that she got to be raised in for her early years, and just talking about the culture and the food. That was really exciting. COVID makes it so hard for us to travel places, doesn't it? I know a lot of you who are all world travelers out there understand that, and it's changed a bit, hasn't it? But hopefully one day we'll get back to our ability to travel more freely and our planet will be healthier. In the meantime, I love the resources that she shared with us just about Black history, about her own personal history, the stories of her nation, and just the resiliency of the people of Sierra Leone. And clearly that is something that she embodies as a human being as well, and as an entrepreneur and an author. And I look forward to hearing more from her in the future and continuing to read and follow the work that she's doing. I hope that you will do it as well. We're going to put all our information in the show notes so you can get her books and follow her work and her wisdom in business and just life. And also, it encouraged me just to see Black history in a different way, and I hope that it helps you to do that as well, and how it can connect with all different areas of life that we hadn't even thought of, like math. How cool was that? So yeah, tune in next week. We'll have more exciting information about Black History Month from another woman who also grew up in Africa and then is in America now, and so an African American in that sense, and who is also an expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has a lot of great information to share with us. We're going to have Martine Kalau on next week, so tune in for that. In the meantime, once again, happy Lunar New Year. The Year of the Tiger, I think, is going to be a really great one. We want a great year, don't we? We have had a couple hard years here, and it would be nice to have just a year feeling like we're kind of bouncing back and thriving again. So that's my hope and prayer for all of us this year. In the meantime, once again, as always, continue to be different in the wonderful ways that each of you are, and continue to make a difference wherever you are. And reach out on social media to let us know how you're doing, your thoughts on these podcasts. We love the interaction that you have with us there, and so continue to do that. We love this community, and it's such a great thing to have you here, and we want you to know that all of you belong. So if somebody needs to belong and you want to invite them into this podcast community, please do so. It's a new year. It's a new year to try new things. So in the meantime, much love to all of you all around the world who are listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.
As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.